Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the regularly scheduled Board of Directors meeting for Marin Water on the 17th of December, 2024. Terry, can I have a roll call, please?
Yes, good evening. Vice President Jed Smith.
Here.
Director Ranjiv Kush.
Here.
Director Diana Mayer. Director Larry Russell. And President Matt Sampson.
Here.
Thank you.
Wait, do we have any public comment on the agenda items?
There are none.
The adoption agenda. Great. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
Great, roll call.
Vice President Smith.
Aye.
Director Kush.
Aye.
Director Mayer. President Sampson.
Yes. Okay, do we have any public comment on the closed session items?
There are none.
Great. At this point, we'll go ahead and adjourn to closed session.
Thank you.
Okay, we are now reconvening from closed session with no reportable matters. Next up, public comments on non-agenda items.
Yes, we have a couple. The first two are Phil Sauter and Bob Milstead.
Good evening. I'd like to thank staff and the board for the support you've given to our watershed, which I think we all agree is the district's most valuable asset. Not only does it supply high quality, minimally treated drinking water to 190,000 district customers, but it also provides high quality habitat to other species. On Friday, I attended a Spawn volunteer appreciation event, which began with a tour of the San Geronimo Creek as it flowed through Samuel P. Taylor State Park. There was a presentation on the life cycle of coho salmon, and then we got to see up close an important part of that life cycle as they're right in the middle of spawning season. For those of you who haven't heard any of Eric Ettlinger's presentations, coho have a 3-year life cycle. They spend their first month as eggs, fries, and smolts, then head to the ocean to feed for a couple of years, and then return to their birthplace where they spawn for a few weeks and then die. What we saw on Friday was this last life stage, with the females building redds to lay thousands of eggs and the males swimming by to fertilize them. We saw a dozen salmon, including a couple of females laying eggs and the rest males jockeying for position to fertilize the eggs. For a female, this process will last a couple weeks, during which she'll lay and protect thousands of eggs, and the males will stick around as long as there are eggs left to fertilize. Then they'll all die, and a few weeks later, the eggs will hatch and begin the process all over again. Each of these 3-year groups is known as a cohort, and this year's cohort is the largest of the 3. It was a good day for watching this process, and the days ahead will be even better. In addition to the fish that are already here, there were a large number of fish waiting to swim upstream. They were waiting for more rain, which arrived on Saturday, so the next couple of weeks will be prime spawning time. On Friday, we saw 3 waders who we believe were Marin water observers documenting the redds and hanging orange flags on the banks next to the redds. For those interested in seeing this process, I'd recommend joining one of Spawn's creek tours, which are happening 2 times a day on Saturdays and Sundays between now and mid-January. Registration is on the Spawn website, and if you can get there by the end of December, I think you have a good chance of seeing this remarkable process happening in our own very amazing watershed. And I think friends and family would be quite interested as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Bob Middlestead. At the very tail end of the last meeting, I made a pitch on a proposed path forward on the e-bike trial program in light of the court's decision. I was tired. I suspect I wasn't the only one who was tired. I assure you that I will not come to every meeting and make the same pitch, but I'd like to just, while we're fresher, just outline it once again. My starting point is that this board has already unanimously approved going forward with e-bikes on fire roads. That was after a very long 6 years, and nobody wants to repeat that, and there was no reason to revisit that. So the question is how to go forward. Fortunately, there is more than one way to peel the onion to save e-bikes. And my starting point is the Class 1 exemption to CEQA, and that's what the court focused on, and that's what the district relied on in part. And it's just coincidental that we're talking about Class 1 e-bikes and the Class 1 exemption. But I think that means something. And basically, the law is that if you can show that there's only a negligible or no expanse in existing use, CEQA complied with without an EIR. It makes sense if there's no increased use, there's not going to be any increased impact. Okay, so then the court said that because let me just get this. He said, there's evidence that people are using e-bikes on the watershed, but no evidence that they're using the 9 trails that were in the single track. If you take the single track out of it, there is evidence that people are using e-bikes on the watershed on fire roads. And what the court's looking for is evidence about an anticipated increase in use. I can assure you, as I have before, there's no one sitting at home with an e-bike saying, I want to ride on Eldridge, but I'm waiting for the board to do something. It's not happening. We can discuss the morality of that, but that's the fact. And CEQA just looks at the baseline, whether the use is legal, illegal, one way or the other. And it's not really an end run around the environmental stuff, because the court also found that the NSO populations were stable, and it was skeptical that merely granting permission for what is already happening to continue happening will result in a greater harm, because it wouldn't. So my suggestion is that that's the path forward. Take evidence through the staff or through public comment or whatever about no anticipated increased use, and we're done. Thank you. Now I'm done.
There are no further speakers.
Great, thank you. Next up is item number 6, Director and General Manager's announcements. Ben, okay, I'll start with you.
I don't have any this evening,
You
President.
make it easy. Thank you. Director Russell.
None.
Great. Director Kush.
Nothing from me, thanks.
Director Smith.
Thanks.
All right. Director Mayer, for the record. Great. And I'm also just one acknowledgement for staff over the weekend. The storm system that came through was packed quite a bunch that we weren't expecting. Luckily, we avoided the tornado component of it, but just thank you for staff for being out there in the rain and the weather and making sure everything was running as soon as we could get power to it. So appreciate that. Next up, board committee reports. I don't believe we have any. So we'll move on to then the consent calendar. Are there any public comment on the consent items?
There are none.
Okay. Can I have a motion to accept the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second,
Terry, roll call.
Vice President Smith.
Aye.
Director Kush.
Aye.
Director Mayer. Director Russell
Aye.
and President Sampson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next up, regular item A, the amendment to the Haven and Sawyer, amendment with Haven and Sawyer for the Castagna Pump Station Rehabilitation Project.
Good evening, President Sampson, and welcome, Director Mayer. I'm Alex Nye, Engineering Director. Here this evening with me is Zach Talbot, our Engineering Manager, who will be presenting this item with the Second Amendment for Hazen and Sawyer in support of the Castagna Pump Station Rehabilitation Project.
Thanks.
Thanks. All right, thank you. See, I've got a presentation tonight. Share. And slideshow. All right, great. Thank you. Thanks, Alex. So as Alex mentioned, tonight we'll be talking about amendment number 2 to the design of Castagna Pump Station Phase 2 with Hazen and Sawyer. In tonight's presentation, we'll be going over the background and history of Castagna Pump Station, the benefits that Castagna Pump Station brings to the district, what we're looking to do in Phase 2, and the amendment to the scope of work that we're seeking approval for. And then finally, our recommendation to the board. The photo to the right is an aerial view of Castagna Pump Station. It sits between Castagna Road and the southbound lanes of US Highway 101 South, just south of Petaluma. A little background in history. The photo you right is showing that Castagna Pump Station. The taller building is actually the electrical room. The smaller kind of structure on the left is the pump house. So Marin Water designed and constructed this in 1977. and operated from 77 to 1999. And its sole intent was to increase flow in the North Marin Aqueduct system, which can run and does run under gravity. And Castaic just increases the flow when the flow requirements are needed. In 1999, Marin transferred ownership to Sonoma County Water Agency, and it sat dormant from 1999 to 2020. During the 2020-21 drought, Marin Water sought to transfer ownership back so we can operate Castaic to increase flow in the aqueduct once again to maximize our allotment from Sonoma County Water Agency. And then our phase one was primarily focused on getting the pump station back up and running. Essentially, it had been sitting, offline for quite some years, and what we wanted to do is essentially grease the bearings, get it started, and get it reconnected back to the aqueduct. The phase two design is really focused on doing a full rehabilitation for reliability. So benefits of what we were able to accomplish in phase one. Well, first, I'll kind of go over with the map to our left, just so you can kind of get a picture of where Castaic Pump Station sits. It's Marin Water's most northern asset. It sits just south of Petaluma. So Petaluma is outlined in black at the north end or the top end of the picture. The blue line is actually the North Marin Aqueduct, and this is where we receive the Russian River water from Sonoma County Water Agency, and it roughly follows US 101. So we can actually gravity feed water from the aqueduct from the Petaluma area down south, and it helps feed North Marin Water as well as Marin Water District. And it's the amount of water we received is based off of how much flow is going into North Marin Water District. And so when we recommissioned Castaic Pump Station, what we were able to do is maximize our water use from Sonoma Water. And it's actually our first modern water supply project that we were able to accomplish. And it actually equates to a 25% increase in the water in the aqueduct line, which equates to approximately 5,000 acre feet of water per year if we were running it 24/7. And what that allows us to do is maximize flow in the aqueduct through our Ignacio treatment plant, which is shown at the far southern end of the photo. And so that way we can maximize flow into our system, regardless of the North Marin Water District's demand. So phase two design really focuses on reliability and redundancy. As I mentioned, phase one was really about kind of getting the lights back on and getting it running in the drought conditions. And phase two is, okay, how are we going to approach rebuilding this so that way it's reliable for the next, 50 years? And it kind of starts with a new electrical motor control center, which will be installed in the electrical room, which is shown in yellow here. Essentially, these are the original starters for the motors that were installed in the 70s, and they're similar to like on-off switches on a light. So you turn them on, they run full speed, and that's all you're going to get out of them. In terms of what modern pump stations have, they have variable frequency drives, which is similar to a dimmer switch on your lights, so you can control the flow a lot better. We were going to and save energy, yes. And demand charge on PG&E, correct. And so what we found was there was the roof, original from the 70s was leaking, so we're going to install a new roof, new HVAC system to help dissipate the heat load from these VFD drives, which would increase reliability, improve drainage around the pump station, and then finally install a pressure relief valve at Ignacio treatment plant. This next slide is just kind of fun. It's just kind of an overview of what the pump station looks like if you're kind of standing at ground level. So on the left in yellow is the electrical room, which is what you walk into. You go down a set of stairs, and the two 400 horsepower pumps and motors actually sit below grade. What's nice about this pump station is there's standby duty pumps, so we only need to run one at a time to get the flow that we want. The other one is there for redundancy purposes. So if you need to rebuild one or fix one, you could just run the other one while you're maintaining the other one. So it's got redundancy built into the system. So kind of a summary of the amendment number 2 to the design is we're looking to design and install 2 new pumps to not only increase capacity, but efficiency. We're looking to install a pressure relief tank at Ignacio Pump Station for added protection to our system, and to create an electrical equipment pre-selection package to help mitigate risk. And I'll go into the 3 of these in the details in the next slide. So one of the big takeaways that we found during the design phase in phase two was that the existing pumps and motors, they're original, they're from the 70s, they're 50 years old and at the end of their useful life. And we don't just say that because of age, but we actually measured the efficiency of them. And they're running at suboptimal efficiency. They're at 60% or below. If you're in the 85% range, that's considered great. So these pumps, although are running and providing water to the North Marin Water District and Marin Water, we're getting charged a lot for PG&E just because they're running inefficiently. We also found that the pumps are vibrating, which would increase premature wear on the pump stations and maintenance costs. And so what we decided during this design phase that it'd be best to actually replace these pumps with new modern design pumps to modern standards, which would increase flow, reliability, and efficiency. And efficiency, I mean PG&E costs. So with these new pumps, we'd be able to increase the capacity by an additional 25%. While maintaining 85% efficiency. So not only are we going to get more flow through the aqueduct, but we're going to be able to do it at a cheaper price because we're running at an 85% efficiency. And so all this equates to reduce maintenance cost and increase reliability and flow in the aqueduct. The second part of the additional design scope is to install an 8,000 gallon relief tank at Ignacio Pump Station. We found that when modeling the two pump stations, they're actually running in series. So if you're running both of them at the same time, if one were to lose power suddenly, you're going to have a surge of water. And you're going to want to release that water almost immediately to protect not only our system, but the aqueduct and North Marin water system. So that slug of water has been modeled to be about 6,500 gallons. And it's impractical to just allow that to spill out into our parking lot and go into a nearby storm drain. So we're going to safely capture it in an 8,000 gallon tank, which is very small. It's about 10 feet in diameter. We'll capture that right there at our Ignacio treatment plant site. And then it'll slowly drain to a nearby sewer inlet. And so what that'll do is essentially just relieve any sort of mitigation of having to dechlorinate the water before it goes into the bay. It could just go to this local sewage treatment plant. And again, this would all help protect our assets, North Marin assets, and the aqueduct.
Why don't we recover that water?
It'd be very hard to recover the water because when there's no at any given point, whether it's gravity feed or the pump stations are running, that line is pressurized that it's being released from. So you'd have to repressurize that water to put it back into the system, and that's just not practical.
How, well, it's only going to be used if there's a failure.
If there's a,
Right.
yes, it'll only happen if there's a failure of power. Correct. So hopefully once in a blue moon. The last portion of the design amendment is for an electrical switchgear package. And the primary purpose of this is to mitigate risk. Part of the design is we wanted to rebuild all the electrical within the existing footprint of the electrical room. So what you can see here on the right is the actual switchgear that was installed in the 70s. NEC code has changed since then and offset requirements are greater. And there's only a few manufacturers that could build switchgear. And by switchgear, it's more like it's like the main panel to your house, right? You got the main breaker, you got your PG&E meter, and then you have kind of the motor starters for each pump and motor. So this will all get replaced with new. And so there's only a few manufacturers that will fit in the existing building. Otherwise, you're gonna have to build a separate building, and we don't want to go into that. So we're gonna pre-select the package prior to going to a contractor. And what that's going to do is mitigate risk on the design side, also on the construction side. So that way we could avoid any sort of contractor change orders down the road.
And Zach, I presume the roof comes off?
No, the roof does not come off. We'll be able to get this through the doorway.
What about the pumps?
The pumps and motors have hatches in the existing roof. So we will, you open the hatch, you get a crane out there, and you could pull the vertical pumps.
And what is the horsepower of the new pumps?
They're the same. They're 400 horsepower. So we were able to select essentially the same sized pumps and motors. They just have different pump curves. So that's how we can get the increased flow.
So our PG&E service stays the same.
Correct. Yeah, the PG&E service, everything on the PG&E side will stay the same.
Thanks.
No problem. This is my final slide. What's the fiscal impact? The original design contract with the $35,000 staff contingency is $384,800. The additional tasks that I covered here tonight, which we're calling task 9, which includes project management services, hydraulic modeling, the new pump design, the electrical equipment pre-selection package, the pressure relief tank, and additional construction support for the replacing of the pumps, equates to $142,342. We're requesting an additional design contingency of $65,000. District staff is recommending the board of directors to approve and authorize the current design contract of $384,800 to include these task 9 services for a new not to exceed contract amount of $527,142. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Zach. Appreciate it. So board comments.
Yeah, a couple more. What kind of pumps, what brand are we looking at?
Gould's, I mean, it'll be kind of up to, we're not going to specify the exact brand. We're just going to put in performance
Yeah.
specifications, but we've kind of looked at a couple manufacturers and they'll have similar pump curves, but we'll have to show what our pump curves are in the contract specs, and the contractor will be required to meet those.
And then the manufacturer provides the pump, the motors, or we're going to spec the motors too?
We're specing the pumps and the motors, and then those will actually be, field tested, or not field tested, will be shop tested and make sure that they're meeting the performance criteria within the contract.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Zach. Super interesting. You spoke, I wasn't clear on how much benefit North Marin receives from the pump station and our rehabilitation efforts. Is it substantial? I mean, is there any, scope for them to contribute to this work?
That's a good question. I don't have a direct insight into their operations. I do know when we're increasing pressure in the line, it does help them fill their tanks. I couldn't specify how much it's helping them.
Yeah, so tell me if I'm off here, Zach, but they own the aqueduct. So the way we pre-Castagna, getting that back in service, we could only use it when there was capacity outside of their use. So they come first. So they don't really benefit because they have the first dibs. Now, having Castagna, as Zach noted in the discussion, we're able to take what we need without really as much concern on what they're doing, because we have that increased capacity in the line with the greater pressure due to the pump.
Right. So there isn't, a big benefit for.
We can think about it, but I don't think so.
Maybe if we're not, trying to get some co-funding, we could at least flag this as an effort to build, more cooperation or regional coordination on water supplies. There may be a messaging element to this.
It's actually a good point. As you were talking, I was thinking, I don't know that we've even engaged with, we probably have to some degree talk to them about this project.
Yeah, they're certainly aware of it. They know when we're running it, certainly. And it's more on the operational side of, hey, we want to turn this on, and they go, yeah, that'll work for us, and so forth. We've actually been running it for the past month or two. So, and as I mentioned, it does, and Ben mentioned, essentially they get first dibs, right? So if we're pushing 18 million gallons through there and they're using the majority of it, once you turn on that pump station, we can maximize Ignacio regardless of what their demand is.
Right.
Which is helpful to us.
Yeah, no, that's important. Thank you.
And putting things in perspective, there's 2 events you didn't discuss, which I think one you should for sure, which is the project that we did under Ben's thought, or I don't know exactly who thought it up, but I'll give Ben the credit, to reconnect the pump station. It had been disconnected from the aqueduct. I've not had that conversation with Krista Grable as why. I remember something about CEQA. There was some growth issue. Or something like that.
It's actually, because it is interesting. I was actually thinking the public comment, Mr. Middlestat was talking about no change in use. So when North Marin was upgrading the aqueduct, they wanted to get through CEQA with no change in use. So by taking Castagna offline, and increasing the size of they could argue that there's no meaningful change in capacity and it won't induce growth. So, and then it was enough time passed and we were in the emergency. We worked with them and they finally supported the effort to bring it back online.
Yeah, the project was brilliantly conceived to rehook up the pump station. The second part of this is what started it all, which is the widening of 101.
Right.
Our pipeline was underneath the traffic lane
Mhm.
when they widened. So it had to come out.
Mhm.
And that's where things get interesting. I went toe to toe with Chris Gabriel about that, trying to get him to go to like a 60-inch pipeline. The pipeline is sized, as I recall, it was 42. I think it went to 44.
Was it 30 to 44?
30 to 44. Okay. That's a result of me tangling with Chris Gabriel. What he had designed was, because of the height of Castagna Tank, they could gravity feed. This is why they're not going to be interested in helping on the pump station. The purpose of the way Chris saw it was to enlarge the pipeline enough to make a gravity feed out of Castagna Tank to North Marin. And the rest is gingerbread. And then, like I say, Chris and I had a toe-to-toe knockdown drag out basically over increasing the size, because Caltrans was paying 90% of the cost. So all we had to pay was basically the material cost to increase the pipeline. And like I said, we compromised at 44. I still think it was too small, but that's kind of the root of how things got where they are. And so it crosses the freeway, and that's a relatively big deal to cross freeways. It's a lot of effort. And but the project worked well, and it works well without the pump station from their viewpoint.
Correct.
But the brilliance of the pump station increase was that it was able to push another 5 MGD through the system, basically, by just shoving it in.
And we've tried to talk, but this was really our first kind of post-drought. It was in the middle of the drought, but I'd say our first kind of modern era water supply resiliency project. So this was kind of the first, and now we're tackling others, but it was significant during the drought. And I thought staff engineering did a great job getting it online amazingly quick.
And construction, because the aqueduct had to be shut off, no flow, to make the connections. And as I recall, it was done in the middle of a horrendous rainstorm. And they really, really put a lot of effort in, working night and day to get this thing hooked up in the shortest possible shutdown of the aqueduct. So it was really a yeoman's effort to make it happen. And it was quite a task to make it connect in the shortest period of time possible. But that was all done. And it's not a simple task. They've got to cut a hole in the side of the aqueduct to attach the new pipe in that weld it all up. So it is a big job to make this happen. And the contractor as well did a stupendous job to make it, as did our inspection crews and engineering staff that was out there with the whip.
Great. Director Smith.
No, I'm all good. Thank you. Thank you so much. Just side note, with the pump station at Nicasio that we looked at a while ago, where does that stand in the priority process in terms of upgrades? Or did we already do that work?
That's probably the Tocolomo pump
Tocolomo,
station.
yeah.
We're currently in design right there. That's coming up here probably in the next year as well.
All right. It
Yeah.
felt like that one was older, more treacherous, and parts that were more difficult. So
Yeah.
I don't know how you prioritize one versus another, but
Yeah, this
I'm looking
luckily
forward
this design for this Castagna pump station is further along and it's ready to kind of get into that next phase for construction.
Okay.
For Tocolomo, we're getting there, we're getting finalizing the design package. So it'll still be probably about a couple of more months to a year before we get it out to
Okay,
construction.
thanks.
Director Mayor.
I don't have any questions.
Okay. In curiosity on the operations, how often are these pumps running, or how often have they run over the past few years?
That's a good question. Usually trying to maximize our demand. So it's kind of working with operations in, Sonoma County to try to get the flow of water to really maximize the allotment we could take.
Not very often.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I figure if they're offline for quite a few years, bring them back on, it's a good thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm just curious to know how often they actually are, how often we actually take that demand in.
Yeah.
Well, part of the reason why we're not running them now is they're not as efficient. There's some vibrational issues, but we can still run them, and so we're running them right now. So one of the pumps we don't like to use because it's vibrating too much, but the other one's working fine, and we could control it enough with the pump control valve, and so we've been running it for I think 2 months now.
Right. And I'm assuming these are future proof. Say we did a conveyance issue south of Castagna, they'd be already designed to take that on. Great. Thank you
Correct.
very much. Excellent. Terry, any public comment?
There are none.
Okay, great. I would like a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Vice President Smith,
Aye.
Director Kush,
Aye.
Director Mayer, Director Russell,
Aye.
and President Sampson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Next up, item B, Safety and Emergency Response Program Update.
Good evening, Director Sean Horn, Director of Watershed Resources, and I'm joined with. Introduce yourself.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Brett Petisich. I'm the Safety and Emergency Response Manager for the district.
All right, we prepared a presentation for you this evening to give you an update on where we've been working and focusing our energy on updating the district's Castagna Pump Station Safety and Emergency Response Program. And tonight, Brett's going to give you a presentation to highlight some of those programmatic updates and where we're going in the future.
Thank you, Sean. All right, so for the outline for what we'll be discussing today, this evening I'll provide updates on the safety program and the role that the Workplace Safety Committee serves the district. Briefly discuss our emergency response program and the culture of preparedness we're focused on achieving, and shine a spotlight on some key partnerships we're nurturing and developing here at the district. So what are some key functions that the Safety and Emergency Response Program provides for Marin Water District? Safety program develops and maintains the district's written safety programs, develops and maintains the district's emergency preparedness program. As it comes to safety training, we do everything from curriculum development. We provide the physical training, schedule, assign, and track the training. And we maintain MMWD's learning management system, online learning management system, which is Litmus. Additionally, we perform employee injury and incident investigations, review, track, and recommend remedial actions related to vehicle accidents, and provide technical review and consultation of staff on safety procedures, policies, and equipment. So as mentioned, fundamental responsibility of the safety manager is developing, revising, and maintaining the written safety programs for the district. And while more often than not, a well-written safety program won't require an annual overhaul, strategic updates may be required due to changes in OSHA standards, state or local law, or internal practices and procedures. And here's a list of our internal written safety programs for the district. Some safety program audit and updates. To get a sense of how our safety program was thriving and where there was room for improvement, we brought on a safety consultant, Harrison Lee Environmental Sciences, in June of 2024. Harrison Lee was asked to coordinate with district staff to perform an audit of our safety programs and practices, which the district has used as a guide to prioritize specific program updates and training opportunities. As previously mentioned, the safety program oversees the district's online learning management system, Litmus. Responsibilities include tracking the staff's learning compliance, scheduling training to meet OSHA requirements, and ensuring proper documentation is achieved. Additionally, when new employees are hired at the district, the safety program is charged with developing and delivering safety orientation training. Periodic written safety program reviews and updates are required to maintain compliance. So over the past year, the district reviewed and updated 9 of our 20 written safety programs. And with each refined written safety program, staff must be educated on the changes. This means revising the training curriculum to align with each updated safety program. The Workplace Safety Committee. The Workplace Safety Committee's role is to promote workplace safety, help reduce accidents and injuries, ensure compliance with regulations, enhance employee well-being, encourage proactive problem solving, promote continuous improvement, and foster communication. Committee members were strategically selected to ensure there was representation from each major division at the district, guaranteeing that staff would have someone with knowledge and expertise in their respective work group with a seat at the table. The Workplace Safety Committee keeps track of safety-related suggestions brought forth by committee members and their work groups to ensure follow-up research is performed and proactive safety solutions are enacted. The Workplace Safety Committee is prioritizing safety program updates and broad engagement to grow and improve the district safety culture. Emergency Response Program. The Emergency Response Program is designed to ensure that the district is equipped to respond effectively to emergencies and disasters. Its primary purpose is to minimize the impact of unforeseen events, safeguard lives, protect property, and facilitate a quick recovery. The main functions of our Emergency Response Program include risk assessment and planning, preparedness, response, communication, and recovery. Over the past year, we revised the Incident Command System organizational chart to reflect current staff functions and district needs in the event of a major crisis or natural disaster. Last month, the district provided Emergency Operations Center training for staff assigned to leadership roles within the ICS chart, detailing the specific responsibilities of the incident commander, EOC manager, section chiefs, and strategic officers. Through careful review and evaluation of our current emergency operations plan, we've begun initiating program updates to align with modern practices. In the spirit of emergency preparedness, we plan to coordinate two response drills in 2025. One at the San Geronimo treatment plant, which will mimic a hazardous chemical spill and how we react and respond, and one in EOC activation and incident action plan exercise. Ongoing emergency response planning. Ongoing emergency response planning will include evaluating emergency operations center capabilities and needs, improving and updating the district's emergency communication platform to enhance how the district communicates with staff during an emergency, evaluating the use of Starlink or satellite internet for remote facilities and ranger operations, advancing the findings of the defensible space evaluation of district facilities for the purpose of wildfire hardening. And we currently have an active application with the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Grant Program for seismic retrofit of San Geronimo treatment plant's clarifiers. Partnerships. District representatives attend the Marin County Office of Emergency Management meetings and training, which are held monthly. Participants include members from all Marin County cities, fire departments, and special districts. This provides an opportunity to coordinate with our Marin County partners on topics such as storm preparation, red flag warnings, and disaster recovery strategies. The topic for the upcoming meeting, for example, we'll discuss the tsunami warning that was issued after the seismic event off the coast of Northern California recently and what a response from Marin County would look like. Staff continues to look for opportunities to engage in technical conferences and working groups. Most recently, district staff attended the California Office of Emergency Safety Hazard Mitigation Summit in Sacramento, where subject experts discussed California's resiliency vision and tools and resources for mitigation, including the latest of hazard mitigation for fires, floods, seismic events, extreme heat, drought, sea level rise, and coastal erosion. District watershed rangers continue to serve as a great resource for developing partnerships between the district and Marin County Search and Rescue, fire, and law agencies through coordinated interagency trainings. And lastly, the district would like to highlight two mutual aid agreements that serve an important function in our emergency preparedness. The first is the district's relationship with Marin County Fire and the ongoing support that we provide one another. And the second is our partnership in the California Water Wastewater Agency Response Network, better known as CalWARN. In summary, the district's safety program is in a good place and remains robust and compliant. The safety audit that was completed earlier this year helped the district prioritize the updating of 9 written safety programs. The Workplace Safety Committee meets every 2 months with representation from across the organization to proactively review safety practices and programs. The district continues to improve and update our emergency communication platform to enhance how the district communicates with staff during an emergency. There are 2 emergency response drills planned for 2025 to help emphasize the importance of emergency preparedness. And the district continues to systematically review and prioritize updates to emergency operations plan. Thank you.
So with that, we'll take any questions you might have about the Safety and Emergency Response Program. But really what we wanted to highlight this evening was just the ongoing focus and the audit of our safety program and the intention to advance that same strategy with our emergency response program, really just to ensure that we're keeping the district fresh on all of its trainings with staff and that all of our programs are up to date and compliant.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, this is kind of just a nice opportunity to share with the board these 2 programs. And I would say, given you haven't heard that much about our safety program is a very good sign, because our accident rate is quite low. And we really do have a nice safety program, and we're, tackling a refresh and training with emergency response. So I'm really pleased, we brought in a ranger to take on this critical role in the district, and Brett, with Sean's leadership, is really stepping up, particularly the safety committee, just to note, these volunteers, and I try and attend, just the energy and commitment. And really, that's what you want with safety, right? You want to embed it into your culture. And I'd say, we have that, but, our goals are much higher than where we are. And I think we're on a good trajectory.
Great. Thank you. Director Mayer. Great. Dr. Smith.
Yeah, thanks. I'm curious how this fits into some of the new California protocols that are being passed on to us around emergency preparedness for water disruption issues. And I'm not sure if this follows into that or not, but I gather that in January, there's going to be a new set of ordinances where districts like us need to have full plans outlined on how we could have potential disruption in our water supply and how we intend to mitigate those risks. And Ben, you and I talked about that a little bit, but is that another report out that we will have in compliance with these new state laws?
Yeah, what we can look into it. I've heard, and I'm not sure if it's there is a requirement now that I heard may be coming strengthened, which is designed to ensure that all water agencies have current emergency response plans, because what they found with some of these fires, right, some of these jurisdictions had no plan, and that's a disaster. So we're well along that. If that's what it is, we'll take a look at it and I'll loop back.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Cush.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you, Sean. Really nice to have this update. Brett, just remind me, I should know this, but when did you transition over from the Ranger program to lead this effort?
In January of this year.
In January. Great. It's good to know. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
Dr. Russell.
I have a couple questions. Being my house is on the water. The tsunami issue caught us a little off guard. Frankly, it's something we'd never even thought about. And we had to go rescue our grandson from the Belvedere Hawthorne Nursery School, which is on the lagoon. And they had already evacuated. I thought that the first responders did a great job. It was a little hectic for my wife, who went to get him, going the wrong way down Tiburon Boulevard, the right way, but the wrong direction. Everybody else is going that way. She's going in. And then we got to thinking about that. That's a little tricky. I don't think we have too many resources that are in that zone. Probably the storage yard is by the Target, but the rest are pretty good. Do we have a tsunami response?
It's definitely something that we can look into, and it's a good question to ask. I know that when that phone call did come in, I happened to be at the Hazard Mitigation Conference in Sacramento. And my first phone call was to Darren Machado. And the question was just, is it possible that we have any employees who are in a possibly affected area? And he was asking the same question and assured me that we did not have any employees in that area. Now, that's something that we should probably, it's a good question to ask, and it's something that we can look into to determine.
Especially meter readers and that type of thing that are on the ground.
Absolutely.
The next comment I have, because you're new to this, I don't know if you had the opportunity, you probably haven't, but I would strongly suggest you guys loop PG&E into this. You should see their emergency response center. Both PG&E and the telecommunications folks have duplicate operation centers. Basically, what we have across the street, they have someplace else so that it can take over. They have a bunker basically that is hardened and ready for anything. They can run their system from it. You know, if we lose what's across the street, we're kind of dead. We're not that high here. I mean, you know, you're, what are we, probably +5 or something like that, maybe +10. I would think the tsunami issue would probably be here. You've got the freeway there, so it's probably buffered. You know, it was funny how that, like I say, that tsunami thing really caught us off guard. Because it's something we never talked about in terms of, never even thought about it. And it, you know, it's doing it on the fly, figuring out what to do, even where to meet after is pretty tricky stuff. But I would strongly recommend you touch base with PG&E because they, from what I have seen, the power and the telecommunications have much more advanced capability than we do. For instance, they're willing to spend the money to build a separate control center. I'm not necessarily proposing we do that, but it is something to think about.
Yeah, thanks for that comment. I'll just note that Brett, when he stepped into the position, started outreaching to other water agencies to understand their safety programs and emergency response programs. And so we've gotten a lot of good information from those folks through that collaboration and conversation. And we'll continue to do that as we think about kind of planning for emergency response.
My point, Sean, though, is that the other utility, the larger utilities are far more sophisticated than the water. The water side is pretty archaic, very frankly, from what I've seen compared to them.
Yep, and then you throw a tornado warning right on top of the tsunami warning, and now we have California. So a couple things. One, this is really good to hear. Thank you very much, especially for getting up to speed over your first 12 months. So it's really good to see all the progress that we've made. Do we have anything memorialized that requires our employee or reminds our employees that they're disaster service workers as public workers with policy?
Yeah, it's on all of our badges.
Okay, great. And then
remind us that way.
do we have associated ICS training with that, the required FEMA stuff, NIMS 100, 700, all that stuff is part of it?
Part of our emergency response program, we're actually currently updating what roles and what classifications should have what training levels in the ICS system.
Especially in the reimbursement component, should we experience a disaster as a requirement? So that's good. And then looking at the ICS stuff, it's really good to hear that the system's being brought into the EOC exercises. And what's going to be a really good component for the board is understanding where the policy direction comes into play and how that marries into the ICS system, not only for us, so when we come in, but also for staff when they understand, you know, don't let the board members in the EOC, put them in a different room, let the folks in the room do the work they need to do, but understanding how we fit into that role. And that's going to dovetail into communications too, because we're going to want to talk as well, but we need to have a continuous message of emergency communications. And then to Larry's point about the warning, I know we work with Marin County and Alert Marin or whatever system they're using now. Do we have internally the system to be able to put alerts out? Are we authorized to do that as a district?
We don't have access to the countywide emergency alert system. In an emergency, we actually do work with the county to put out those messages through their systems.
Okay.
And have plans in place with their PIO team that would coordinate that function.
Is that something that would benefit us to have that access, or is? I mean, I'm thinking boil water messages. There's a whole litany of stuff we'd want to be able to get the message out quickly.
And all of that gets coordinated through the county, and we would be in a joint information center system and in a disaster or in a situation like that where we would have emergency messaging going out.
It's a good question, President Sampson. I mean, there's arguments on either. I think Santa Rosa's experience that some of us went through, but you have far more than we had. if everyone's doing their own messages, kind of can overwhelm versus a thoughtful, prioritized, consistent language that people are seeing on their same Nixle feed. So, it's a good discussion and we've had it a number of times.
And we're seeing the, I guess, the wake of that after the tsunami warning, because the Weather Service puts out an alert, but it's their policy not to reverse the alert once they put it out. So everyone's scrambling to do their own thing. But, for us, we're the subject matter experts on the water quality
Yeah.
or whatever needs to happen. So hopefully, the Joint Information Center should check that box as well.
Yeah, and they're working with all of the other partner agencies that may have emergency information they're putting out. And so it's really consolidating that down and making sure we're all coordinating together. I think the other part of it is such a great effort's gone into getting the community signed up for the countywide alert systems, that's the best place to lean to get the messaging out and not confuse community.
Great.
And it does allow, as just for example, caught me by surprise in Santa Rosa, the fires that, wait, of course, top priority is evacuation and life safety. It's not water. Water's a high priority, but let the evacuations happen, life safety issues, then we move to water and then,
And I will say, just even right now when we have red flag warning days and other kind of weather events, we do coordinate with the county on some of that pre-messaging if we're going to have any, closures on the watershed. And so we already are kind of practicing that joint system for communications. And so we do stay in coordination with them even outside of an emergency and some of that, which I
Right.
think is
Okay.
helpful in maintaining those relationships.
Thank you. The only other thing to keep, I'm sure you guys are probably keeping up on it, but when you look at stuff like Sky Oaks or even here, making sure, especially when it's a 24/7 operation, that there's food for 3 days for all the people and things like that. So I think we're okay on the water for 3 days. It's just the. All right. Well, thank you very much. Terry, any public comments?
Before you go
Oh,
there,
great.
you brought up an interesting question about boil water notices. They're not automatic from my experience. They require some form of proof, chloroform testing, which is 24 hours. Now, I don't know, do we have a policy on pressure loss? Kicks that in? If we lose pressure in the main, do we then say we need to issue boil water, or do we hold back until we actually see the result?
I'd say
No, why
in
did you
something
do
like
it?
an emergency, you've lost, oh, thank you. In something like an emergency, like an earthquake, seismic event, where likely we're losing pressure throughout the system, you just do a boiled water, rather safe than sorry, and just get it out of the way. There are instances here that we think, with that break, did we
Yeah,
get a
yeah.
blip of no pressure, but we think it was maintained and we'll do an expedited sampling. So somewhat case specific.
Yeah, I think the latter is the more common approach.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Terry, any public comment?
There are none.
Okay, this was just an update, so we'll move on to items. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item C, dual noticing of committee meetings.
Thank you, Director Sampson. Directors, I'm Molly McLean, General Counsel for the district, and I'm here to walk us through this item. It is listed on the agenda as an action item in the event that the board is interested in pursuing action on our dual noticing policy. This is a practice that has been in place at the district specifically for a number of years. Last acted on by the district board in January of 2020. It has been reviewed from a legal standpoint and is compliant, was found compliant with the Brown Act.
Molly, can I just ask a quick clarification?
Of course.
You said it was last acted upon in 2020. Is that when the dual noticing went into effect for the first time?
No, I believe there was actually dual noticing prior to that. There was some pause and examination of the legal issues when those were raised, and then there was a formal action of the board to re-implement or implement the dual noticing. But I think it's been a practice for longer than January 2020, much longer.
Decade? Are we talking?
Oh,
I think in that ballpark, if not longer, maybe.
Larry probably knows.
Understood. Okay.
Yeah.
Larry, do you know when dual noticing
Was first implemented.
initiated here?
I know why. I'm not going to think about when. It seems to me it was about midway through my tenure. about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It was a result of cost. Mimi was complaining about the structure of our meetings, and it was a way to work through that.
Mhm.
That's why it happened,
Right,
as I recall.
right. To assure Brown Act compliance. That's my understanding, and there was a review. It is an unusual practice for districts and for local government agencies. Standing committees are allowed under the Brown Act. They have to comply with the Brown Act. Typically, there are fewer than a quorum of the legislative body. So the practice of duly noticing them as special board meetings allows the entire board or a quorum of the board to attend and to participate. Whereas if a committee meeting was noticed as a standing committee meeting only, that would allow only the committee members to participate in the meeting. Any other board members who were not on the committee then would only be able to observe the meeting, not be at the dais, not participate, not have discussion. So we have discussed this item a few times over the past couple of years. We've revisited it, we've examined it, we've decided to continue the practice for the time being. And recently it was requested to come back to the board for consideration one more time, at least. It's actually, because it's purely a policy decision, it's at the discretion of the board and their interest at any given time, quite frankly. So I did continue to have some parameters or specifications for any possible rollback. These are items that we've discussed previously in bringing this dual noticing item forward with a recommendation, if the board is interested, to undo the practice to essentially provide direction to staff to stop duly noticing our committee meetings as special board meetings and simply notice them as committee meetings. Those are bullet items in the staff report 1 through 3. So it would be effective January 1st that staff would no longer duly notice standing committee meetings, that only the chair and the vice chair would participate if those were to be noticed as committee meetings. We would also implement an exception. We talked about this previously also, that dual noticing could happen if there was an item of significant importance or interest to the full board, that committee meeting could still be noticed as a special board meeting to allow full attendance from the board. And then that would be a decision that was looked at with our district general manager and the committee chair. And that we would endeavor to provide a month's prior notice to the board so that would allow calendars to be looked at and examined for participation. Because next item, we will talk about the board calendar. And then all standing committee meetings would continue to have virtual access for the public, and they would continue to be recorded and then posted on our website. So those would be available for later viewing, or board members who wanted to view them live could sign on to the Zoom. They simply wouldn't be participants unless they were on the committee itself. So as I said, this is purely a policy decision, but I'm happy to answer questions about the practice if there are some.
Director Russell.
Well, as I said the last time this came up, I am strongly in favor of the dual noticing, primarily because of the inexperience of the board members that are here. I think that the more participation that occurs in the committees, the better everyone is, because it is having experienced prior to the dual noticing of sitting in the audience, being unable to speak other than to ask a lay question. It's frustrating, to say the least. The second part of that to keep in mind is that the consent calendar is in part constructed from discussions that have occurred outside of the board meeting. So the committee meetings feed in part to the consent calendar. So the only way to really get the full import of the meeting is to be there. Now you can watch it. That's true. Unfortunately, I think most of our meetings are a bit like watching grass grow, paint dry. It's, I hear people say they've seen all the meetings. You go, okay, maybe. It's pretty tough to spend the time and to repeat it, basically, especially when it's not live. So, as I said, I am strongly in favor of continuing the practice because I think it's very efficient. Having been the only one here, probably the only one in the room that's experienced both alternatives. And I think the current alternative is far superior to the prior alternative.
Director Kush.
Larry, I certainly hear your points, but I think I would be in favor of making a revision based, following the conditions that you've outlined here, Molly, in the proposal. I think it's a lot to ask of board members, and I understand that we're not required to attend meetings, but when something is noticed as a board meeting, then it does put I think an emphasis on participation. I think it's a lot to ask people that have a lot of other commitments. I think it's, as I said in a previous meeting, I think it's a real barrier to entry to joining the board. I think it creates inefficiencies in that perspective. And I do think for somebody who is really committed to understanding the issues, there's a lot of opportunity to review the meeting videos and to read about the issues that are being included on the consent calendar and ask questions during the full board meetings. So I'm in favor of a revision.
Director Mayer.
I'm torn. I certainly understand Director Russell's point, and I could see how that could be frustrating at times. But I think I am gonna say that I'm generally in favor of doing away with the dual noticing. One of the things that really excited me about being a director was the idea of being a conduit between the public and employees or whatnot, and the leadership. And I already find I'm spending a lot of time, which I enjoy and want to do. I've reached out to talk to the employees and kind of go to one of their meetings, one of the labor union meetings, and hear kind of about their concerns and whatnot. And I've had people call me up already and say they want to talk to me about various issues. And I know when people reach out to me with problems and whatnot, I'm going to be very responsive. So I really like the idea of taking a deeper dive into certain areas in a way that I think would be hard to do if I was also going to a board meeting a week, just given a job and a family and all of that. So I would lean that way right now.
Dr. Smith.
There always, I feel like, has to be a reason why you do things totally differently than every other agency. And I don't know that I really have a sense of why we do this so differently. With that said, I think it kind of works. I do think we learn a lot. We all participate, and I think the public is probably better served by our engagement, and it would be much more engagement doing it the way we have been. It's more work for the staff. I think it's difficult. It's a lot of prep. And so I definitely see pluses and minuses. I think I'd be in favor of maybe not doing dual noticing for every committee meeting. And I think a little bit of thought about which ones we would do it for. And in talking with Ben, I got the sense that we are looking at committee structures, and maybe some of the committees might have a slightly different mandate. So I would like to see how the committees look in the coming year. But I would be in favor with some number of the committees ending the dual noticing and having a proposal made to do that, rather than having all of them be changed right now. So I would say I'm in favor of a revision, but maybe not for all of them.
Interesting points on that. And I think that's a good discussion. I don't know how deep we can get into it tonight without coming up with a possible action item to move on. But any thoughts on committees? Which ones would be dual noticed or which ones are not, or still waiting to see?
Well, I guess we have finance, operations, watershed, and communications. Anything else? Am I missing one? Okay. Yeah, I think that I'd say watershed and communications probably does not need to be a dual noticed meeting. I'm comfortable with finance not being dual noticed, but I think operations, depending on how it looks, could have a lot more meat to it and I think there's some ways that we can make that committee broader than we're just looking at capital projects and infrastructure. So I wouldn't mind an understanding of the scope of that committee a little bit more and potentially understanding the scope of watershed and communications, which is somewhat of an odd kind of mixture. I wouldn't mind really a better understanding of how we think those two committees might look and what their charge is going forward.
Gotcha. Almost broadening the definition of the operations committee. I look to the current chair on that, something that would include more of maybe a water supply focused or some sort of long range. I don't use the word planning, but something along those same lines. Is that something that would work in terms of our current system?
Yeah, I would start with a name, and it may seem trivial, but most agencies have a planning committee and not an operations, performing somewhat similar functions. I think planning kind of opens it up broader and is kind of a more traditional policy-oriented approach, and it would just naturally, we do a lot of planning in a lot of different ways, kind of feed into that in a model that, many agencies have. A consideration I've mentioned as the board thinks about committees is unusual to have a communication and conservation committee. One approach, if the board would be up for it, that would benefit staff in terms of workload, would be to maybe test doing away with comms communication with a prescribed schedule of minimum quarterly updates would come to the planning committee. That sort of vision, I guess, is I wanted to share with the board. Thank you for that.
Okay. We're getting a little outside the initial report here, but I think it's a good conversation to continue to have because I think there might be a hybrid solution that checks all the boxes that doesn't do away with too much of the benefits. Because, for me personally, and Larry, I listen when you say how much of a benefit it is because, especially with experience on the board, to be able to get caught up to speed. And it is a benefit. And I think, well, if I hung out with Ben and the senior leadership team all day too, I'd probably get a benefit. And if I hung out with Molly, I'd get a benefit. And Sean, if you let me ride along with your folks, I get a benefit too. And yes, I'll hang out over here. But I guess where I'm going is at what point is it a benefit or too much of a commitment? And not saying we're getting in the weeds, but just in terms of bandwidth. And I look at this dais and I continue to be impressed with the skill set and the background that we have. And for me, what I'm used to is folks tackle certain areas, dive deep, really understand what's going on, then come report back to the board with their opinions, and then let the board synthesize their opinions and move forward with it. And that's what I'm used to. And so for me, going away from the dual notices for most of the committees makes a lot of sense. And especially coming out of, we had a discussion a couple of weeks ago about barriers to entry to the board in terms of commitments and time commitment is a big one. And all these additional meetings are part of that equation. So I think it's important too when we're looking at it, because one of the things I heard all the time and especially when I ran was how much of a commitment is this? How much time is this going to be? How much is it going to keep me away from my home? And which are all important questions, but at the same time, you are signing up to do a public service, but there's got to be some balance, some way with that. So I think where I'd like to see us look at here is, and timing's not great, but if there's a suggestion from staff to look at the committee reassignments, especially before we look to assign for 2025, and then combine that with a potential removing dual notices or something, does that make sense? One, for the board to consider as an option instead of looking at what we're looking at tonight? And then two, is that something that's operationally feasible from staff?
Well, thank you for that. I'll try to break that down into the parts and pieces that make sense to me. And that is, we did not agendize a reconfiguring of the committee structure. So you're correct on that. And we could certainly look at that. We don't have committee appointments yet. We do have a board calendar tonight. We do want to adopt the board calendar before the end of the year because that is a policy that the board has adopted to do that. But we can make changes to the calendar. That's not undoable. So I would say yes, we can certainly bring back the dual noticing question in conjunction with a consideration of committee structure. If that feels like that makes more sense and will be more approachable and make it, better inform the decision for the board. Certainly can do that. I would defer to Ben on what the committee structure looks like and, the staff input for that.
I definitely think we can move forward with the board calendar as the next item tonight. And if we have to remove some stuff, remove some stuff. But I don't want to kick the can down the road on this. And I think, my preference would be, this would be, unless there's some sort of revision, that we don't revisit this for a while again, because we've already seen it a few times. If we can't make a decision, we should move on from it. But at the same time, I don't want it to muddy the waters if there is a desire to potentially claw back a committee, potentially expand a committee. If that's something that's presentable within, within January.
Next board meeting,
Yeah.
we'd be able to do that.
Okay.
That's January 7th
Yes.
is the next board meeting.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, there's other options too. I'll just throw some ideas out there. And so we can, one, I'm hearing we could defer the decision to the January 7th meeting in conjunction with looking at the committee structure. And then maybe that would help inform decision process. Two, we could, I would say a pilot project, but it's really not a pilot because anytime the board is interested or two board members are interested in having it brought back for discussion, that can happen. So it is purely discretionary and purely a policy decision for the board. So we could adopt the revisions and then make adoptions based on committee structure or at the next meeting. So that's another option to proceed with direction or action tonight on the dual noticing, to rescind it, then to talk about the committee structure. And then there's, I think those are the two options. I would say simply not moving forward with dual noticing would be a third option, or simply not rescinding dual noticing, simply not moving forward with an action tonight at all.
Yeah, I'd be comfortable rescinding dual noticing for the Finance Committee and Watershed and Communications Committees. And revisiting operations or whatever we call it on January 7th when we have the committee reports all set.
And with that, we would have, what would be potential new organization of what the committees would look like in terms of
we
names and
would
content?
bring that and perhaps other considerations, like is Friday the best day for ops, that kind of thing, just for the board to think about. So yeah, I think staff would appreciate the opportunity to bring some thoughts for the board's consideration.
Okay. Well, sorry. Lee.
Might it be better to do that at the retreat? Very frankly, I don't know I haven't seen the agenda for the retreat, so I don't know how full you've got it packed. But it seems to me that might be a better forum for that kind of discussion.
Yeah, that's not a huge delay. That's scheduled for the
A week.
15th?
The 14th.
The 14th.
We typically would not take action at the retreat, so it's just a
Of course.
discussion, but yeah.
Of course.
Can I ask a question? Council, what would the process be if we wanted to have a committee meeting have dual notice, if we did away with that as a default? Can anyone suggest that and then we vote, or how does that happen?
You mean for special instances? Yeah. The way that I put it in the staff report was that it would be the general manager with the committee chair, with the understanding that what typically happens is staff with the general manager kind of leading the charge, looking ahead at what are those agenda items that are going to be coming forward and what are the larger sort of more substantive items. For example, when we did the watershed management planning feasibility study, that was of kind of a broader interest. And that might have been an example of where we might do dual noticing as opposed to just a committee meeting notice.
Right. Another example for, we're starting the 2-year budget development. As we bring that to finance, the chair and I may look at it and say, that should be a dual noticed item, invite the entire board, of course, to.
And how does that decision get made?
The way that I have it drafted here would be general manager with the chair of the committee and trying to identify that about a month out so that all board members could make room in their calendars to make sure and attend. Another option is to notice a special meeting for any particular things, just a special meeting, not a committee meeting. Let the committee meetings be the committee meetings and then have a special meeting on budget or, and that is a 24-hour notice, but we would always pull the board to try to, make sure everybody could attend.
Or just put it on a regular scheduled.
Or put it on a regular board meeting.
There's not a time sensitive
Yes.
component for that.
A couple of things. I presume that we can access it on Zoom,
Access it, meaning
the
that
meeting,
the meetings are accessible via Zoom. Yes.
the board members.
The board members can access the meeting via Zoom. In order to attend as a member of the committee or board, it has to be appropriately noticed for virtual attendance. And we've discussed that.
Well,
previously.
except you're not participating, so you're just
Oh,
a
so-
observer.
Yes, of course.
So you can do that.
You can attend as a member of the public. You would not be on the
Of course,
panelist list.
course.
Right.
The second thing is that one of the benefits of this that I don't know that's being appreciated here is that it is basically a tool to shorten board meetings. We were going through a period where our board meetings were running 6 hours, something like that, to midnight. And by moving these activities into a larger forum, you get over the discussion at a different time. And you don't have to pack the board meetings because I'll tell you, I can remember it's difficult to sit here for 6 hours. Now, compared to Larkspur and places like that, I've been at meetings there at 2 a.m. making presentations to the city council. So there are other marathon issues that result, and those are difficult. It's difficult to schedule people. It's difficult to get people's attention at 2 a.m. I'm not proposing that we necessarily have 2 a.m. meetings, but it's not hard to get to 6 hours. It gets there pretty quickly. And
I don't know if you're asking for a response. I would say that, there's definitely some shifts in the way that the district would operate if we were to make this change. And I think that it would be incumbent upon staff to make sure that we were, fully briefing these items. It would also be incumbent upon committee members to make sure that they're bringing back. And in this case, if we had committee meetings as opposed to duly noticed meetings, special board meetings, we would ask the committee to make a recommendation to the board. So that's a kind of a different mechanism. I
that's
think
the
you're
whole
right.
point.
Mhm.
Because that recommendation, you mean we would act on that recommendation of 2 people?
I think that it would become, we don't ask the full board to make a recommendation to itself because that's tantamount to action. So we ask for a first and a second. A committee, it would just simply be a different mechanism, I think. And that would put, I think, in my perspective, and it's just one perspective, a bit more accountability on each of the committee members to make sure that they were really understanding the issues and prepared to address questions potentially from other board members.
Yeah, I don't see that happening in that format. I see it the exact opposite. It's put onto the consent calendar and then one of us will take it off. Okay, because they're going to say, well, I didn't have a chance to participate in that. I don't want to vote on it in consent calendar because I want to hear it. So I don't understand your comment, Matt, about how it, or maybe it was Jed, I don't remember, it lengthened or increased staff issues. I mean, the staff has to prepare the same for the committee as they do for the board. So whether there's 5 board members here or 2 board members here, the staff's going to do the same job, I think, unless I'm not seeing something.
And one of the things and this is what I'm used to, is that there's a consent calendar. The staff reports will be in detail, be a recommendation from the committee. And then as part of the preparation for the meeting, read through. And if there's an issue, then yes, I'd like to pull this item for further discussion. But if looking at a contract and seeing it, especially if someone with some subject matter expertise, if the Castania pump station came through you and you said, I'd be like, what, sounds good, and move that way.
And Larry, that's, to me, that is the norm in most public agencies.
Whatever. It hasn't been the normal here. It never came up in the 10 years that we had this procedure. So I find that interesting. It's not particularly a comment on it. It's just an observation. The observation being that the folks who were more familiar with it and more familiar with the operation of the district found it useful because it never, ever came up. And, it's difficult. Like I said, if you haven't sat through a 6-hour board meeting, it's difficult to understand what that means. We talk about inconvenience of the staff. Trust me, when midnight comes, in fact, I can recall having to adjourn meetings and just say, we're going to lop off 2 items and push them to the next meeting because it's like 11 or 11:30. So, I caution you in this, ain't broke, don't fix. That's kind of my philosophy of life. I think that the value, especially for folks that, like you guys, that are not that familiar with the operation of the district. You're more familiar now than you were, but you're still got a lot to gather. And I think the value of being an active participant in these things is something not to be underestimated. As I said, I'm the only one, maybe even the district now at this point, that's been through both sides of this. And I urge extreme caution in changing things that I hear you, I do hear you. I just think the benefits outweigh the concerns, in my opinion.
So that brings us back to your question here. So I think looking forward to the next item, I think we can move forward with the calendar as it is. I don't see why we wouldn't be able to approve the calendar for the following year. That gives us leeway either way, how we move from that.
Correct.
So the next question would be is there a desire from staff to have a proposal for a reorganization of what the committees will either be called, look like, or shall exist by the next meeting? And if that's the case, then it makes sense to not do away with dual noticing for everything until we see what we're voting on. Because if it's a different layout of the committees, I'd like to see that before we vote on it.
Yeah, it feels like the board's receptive to hearing, and staff would appreciate the opportunity to share those thoughts.
Okay. Any further comment on that?
One quick one. I had never thought about the question you brought up and about whether the operations committee is on Fridays or not on Fridays. I don't know that it makes any difference, but I don't know that there's a benefit. If it were on Tuesdays, would it make any difference? I don't know. That's an interesting question. I think we have to be careful about not lopping onto board meeting days. That's not a good situation.
Yeah, my interest on the Friday is board meetings, are rather late in the day, and that limits the ability generally for staff to sit in and just experience. Committees, on the other hand, during the day, you allow that. And Fridays is a day, it's work from home, and you
I
take
see.
3
There's
days
something else.
vacation.
Okay.
So
That part didn't come
Yeah.
through. Okay. I see. There's a social need to change it, perhaps.
Okay. But if we're going to move forward with the calendar vote, are we going to be looking at days changing for the committees or just content? And
I defer to Molly's interest to move forward with a vote, and, we can make changes if, the different thoughts, if there's some that resonate with the board, it'd be easy enough to update.
we do have a policy for the board to adopt a calendar by the end of the year. It does provide some benefit, I think, to understand at least what that next set of meetings is on calendar for our staff, for the board members as well to plan.
And the public, I
and the
think the
public.
part you're skipping is probably what I think is the most important part.
Thank you for reminding me on that. And I wouldn't want to leave them out. And that said, it's not that we can't make adjustments to the calendar if necessary.
Okay, great. So unless there's further comment, I'd like to table item C until we get a updated committee list and content till the next meeting.
Are we talking about the next meeting or the retreat?
Okay, yeah, no, sorry, we have those to the 7th of January meeting.
Okay, because I think we should seriously think about the 14th. I think it's an easier format to have the conversation, the retreat, as opposed to the board meeting.
How does the retreat look in terms of agenda?
I do feel like it would fit in the current agenda. Generally, it's similar to last year, reviewing the upcoming work plan, the highlights from the past year and the upcoming work plan consistent with a strategic plan. I think given this is the second year we've done that, it'll move along with certainly discussion, but that's essentially what we have now. So I do think this would work if the board, supports that idea.
I don't have any issue. Any other board members looking to move it 1 week past for that?
That's fine.
Okay, great.
I do have a question. I'm sorry if
Yeah,
I may
please.
ask. How will that work for the upcoming regional meetings that will occur in January prior to the?
Well, right. I think that what we would be doing is potentially going forward with adoption of a calendar, leaving things status quo with respect to committees. We do have committee appointments coming up in the new year. Those could be made and then there could be changes. There's really no prohibition, but it is, just trying to think through how that's going to work
They'll
and
still
who's
remain.
going to,
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
gonna be going.
Continue with current assignments. So we do want to.
No, I think let's not get too far off track on this. I think we have a good system set up in place. We have a vote on a calendar next. We've got committee assignments the first week of January, and then we can revisit as needed and pivot. One request though, if we could put this item number 1 on the retreat, so it's not at the end of the day, we could tackle it first and get it over with for that. Great.
Or it could be the lunchtime discussion.
No,
Lunchtime.
no.
Thinking,
I mean, it's not that hitty. I don't
I'll
think.
work with the president on the agenda. I'm planning to anyway for the retreat, and we'll make it work.
Okay, great. You're one. Excellent. Terry, any public comment on this?
Yes, Mr. Phil Sauter, please.
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't even sure what dual noticing meant. This discussion, I got a flavor of it, and Terry very kindly explained it to me before the meeting, so thank you for that. And I do appreciate the reference to the public in this discussion, although it wasn't first and foremost. So as a member of the public, I've attended many of these committee meetings, especially those to do with water efficiency and demand management. I've heard some really good presentations at these committee meetings. And I'm concerned that if there are only 2 members at a committee meeting, the quality of those presentations and that discussion may suffer. I'm also aware that any public input at these committee meetings would be heard by as few as 2 board members. I appreciate Director Russell's perspective, having lived through the presence and the absence of this current system. I was a little discouraged that some board members are having second thoughts about time commitments, and I hope that can be resolved some other way than by paring down these committee meetings. I'd like to suggest that if there is to be a change or a vote, that it be tried out on a 3-month basis for one committee. And I would say pick the committee that has the least public interest and the least public participation. I could throw out one, but I'd rather let the board discuss that among themselves and figure out which one that the public doesn't have much risk from being excluded from. But for the most of the committees, I'd like to still see a robust attendance by board members and an interchange with the public. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to item D, 2025 Board and Committee Meetings Calendar.
Good evening, directors. Adrienne Mertens, Communications and Public Affairs Manager. So the calendar for board and committee meetings, as you're aware, is adopted annually. And as Molly described in the last item, is developed based on guidelines in our Marin Water Board policy. And so a proposed draft of the 2025 calendar is attached to your staff report. And just a couple
I
notes.
unfortunately never saw the packet. I don't know if it obviously was mailed to me, but it never got to us. So I haven't seen it. Is there something thank you.
Thanks, Molly.
I know you're going to put it up.
Yeah.
But
Oh, I actually am not going to put it
Oh, you're
up.
not?
So we're glad
Okay.
she's giving you that hard copy.
okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Molly. So just a couple notes on the calendar. This was prepared by staff. It's in alignment with our board policy and also past board practice. The schedule does take into consideration the director's involvements in regional boards and committees that the district's associated with, and also possible participation by board members at annual water industry conferences. The schedule also takes into consideration district observed holidays, as well as school holiday breaks and other religious observances. And so anywhere where we have exceptions in the calendar, you'll see that those are noted, annotated. And then on the reverse side of the schedule is the reasoning for that. And so for now, we'll leave the headers at the top for committees as duly noticed. Since there was no action on the previous item. And unless there are any questions needed on some of the exceptions, the staff is recommending tonight that the board adopt the calendar. And I should mention that the board does, the policy says we adopt it tonight, the board can make any changes and has that discretion. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Adrienne, thank you. And again, thank you for the this year again for making sure that all of the holiday breaks and everything like that were put in. It takes time to do so. Appreciate the attention to detail. And any board comments on the calendar itself or any requested changes?
Yeah. I'm having thought issues about the Friday with the board meeting. Remote attendance by staff is available. So even if they're working at home, they could take the time to watch the Zoom. With that said, I think it would still make sense to consider moving it to a workday, because working out of my house routinely, it's hard to even remember when the meeting is sometimes, let alone if you're here and it's here and you're interested, you can just walk in. So I think we should consider that. I'm looking at the basic scheduling here. Most things appear to be on Thursdays, and I don't see any reason that the operations committee, planning committee, whatever its new name is, can't be done on Thursdays. I think we could probably do that, or we could let it slide and do it later. But I think that's something, and I've kind of checked it across. I don't see any real conflicts from what I can see.
We'd probably want to go back and just do a thorough check of something like that. It is, as President Sampson mentioned, a little bit of a challenge to make sure we're all good on all of our dates. So I would feel more confident looking closer at it. before we-
Sure. Well, there's one in September, obviously, the 18-19 is one of the issues. But I think, it depends on how the committees are structured, huh? So I'm cool either way. If we want to go with what we got, that's fine. If we want to move that one,
Clarification question. Can we alter the board calendar throughout the year? So if we do have time, if Adrian, if you are able to check on those dates and we do have any sort of, structure change that we would be able to adopt and change it at that point, maybe even continue the conversation on the 14th.
yeah, the only problem with that is historically, and I've been a real pusher on this one, is once we release this, we don't change it. If we can avoid it.
Understood.
Because people like Phil and the public look at it and say, okay, I'm available these days or I'm not. Then we move it. And it's not impossible. I just think it's not a real good practice. At this point in time, we're talking about the middle of December to the middle of January. It probably is irrelevant. The amount of discomfort or issues would be small. On the other hand, moving it one day is pretty easy too. Now, that may cause some problems from the passing of it. And maybe it's just easier to pass it as is and put it in place.
I'm good with Thursday or Fridays. If it matters to the staff, I'd follow the staff's lead.
Yeah.
Yeah, my preference would be to take that into consideration and bring, kind of the considered set of possibilities that staff comes up with and discuss that with the board at the retreat, as you suggest.
How do we get around the problem of approving the calendar before the end of the year? Just go ahead and approve this?
I think so. Approve it now.
You can approve it and you could post an amended calendar for folks in a few weeks if
Okay.
that happens.
That's cool. That solves the problem.
Any other questions?
I have 3 changes that I'd like to see if people could do. February 4th board meeting. I mean, I think we have 3 in January if you include the retreat. And then you're skipping a week because of the President's Week holiday. I know I'm not going to be able to make the 4th. And so I'm hoping that we can make that the 11th instead. It would still be 2 weeks.
That seems reasonable.
And it's not on a vacation.
Yeah, just looking at this, I think the only thing to flag there is that there'd be 3 meetings that week, but that's certainly happened many times before. So as long as the board
And
was okay with
I'm in
that.
support of the 11th.
Okay.
On the June 27th meeting, 27th operations meeting, it seems like all the other operations meetings are in the middle of the month. I guess there's a footnote. I can't read it. So what's the reason why we put that one off another week or 2?
The Juneteenth holiday, I think is the reason for moving that one.
So it was originally scheduled June 19th.
Juneteenth, yeah.
Yeah, that's Friday.
No, it's the day after, but it's,
Yeah, we did
Weren't
try where we
sure.
could to avoid scheduling meetings up, like,
There. Yeah, I'm for that one in the 26th Finance Committee meeting, I am not going to be here. So, and that one just seemed out of cadence. So maybe it's because of the holiday we can't do it. I don't know.
Which
But
are we talking about now?
Juneteenth is on a Thursday and yeah, the meeting's
on a
a
Friday.
Friday. So we were trying to avoid scheduling the meeting the day after a holiday. But
Heading into a weekend.
yeah,
Okay. And then there's the 26th Finance Committee meeting. Okay. I'm not gonna be able to make that one here either. So it's a conflict.
Is there another date that works for the finance one?
We could do it the week before. But I'm not sure if that works with Brett, given what we need to do for
That's
budget.
June 19th.
that's the
yeah,
holiday.
that's the holiday. June got a little
All right,
tricky.
I'll zoom in as long as we can still do Zooms. So
Yeah,
those are-
we can
those are
still do
fine.
Zoom.
Okay.
Okay. Any other?
Well, now, how does that work? If we don't have 3 in the district, we can't do that, right?
Are you talking about if it's solely a committee meeting? Well, we don't have a quorum
Exactly.
So
anyway,
it doesn't matter?
so it doesn't matter.
Okay. And do you need to post address?
I would do it just to be consistent. Yes.
Okay, I have one more quick comment. April 1st is my birthday, so if we're going to do it on April 1st, let's have some kind of cake or something. Okay.
Oh, we should do dinner first. I mean, then.
Dinner works. Yeah, that works.
Any other changes, recommended changes?
No.
Okay, great. So with that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the 2025 board and committee meeting for Marin Water. With the,
Yeah, maybe with,
one
could
cha-
we maybe just, yeah, I want to clarify. So we're changing the February 4th meeting to the 11th. The other,
two will stay, and that's
okay.
the one change.
all right, thank you.
So moved.
Second.
Terry, any public comment on the board calendar?
There are none.
Roll call vote, please.
Vice President Smith,
Aye.
Director Kush,
Aye.
Director Mayer,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
and President Sampson.
Yes,
Thank you.
great. Item number 10, future board and committee meetings.
That's gonna be a little tricky.
No, this one's actually pretty good. This one, you guys spared me on this one. So the remainder of this week, we'll have a few meetings. We have on Thursday, the Watershed Committee meeting, and Friday, the Operations Committee meeting. Tomorrow is the Tamales Bay Foundation meeting, and then there are no more meetings in the month of December. And then the North Bay Watershed Association meeting is Friday, January 3rd. That's all I have.
Great, thank you. And then as part of that, any items that the board would like to consider for future agendas?
Nope.
Great. With that, we'll go ahead and close.
One thing, why are the 3 board meetings in January?
Retreat.
Retreat.
Well, that's the retreat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And where'd the 5 PM come from?
It's the far left column. It says
Oh,
5 PM for the
5:30,
board meeting.
January 7th. That's tentative because the calendar wasn't adopted.
It's just
No, but
the,
w-
item
it says
number
5
1.
PM.
It's a footnoted 1.
Yeah, so
And then-
that's indicating closed sessions can begin as early as 5, but the annotation does clarify that the regular meetings start at 6:30.
Okay,
Yeah,
so no change.
yeah,
That's correct.
yeah.
Great. And with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.